Alrighty, let's get ourselves situated. Alright. Alrighty. Hi, Patricia. I was just wondering if you were gonna get the thing, but I'm glad you did. Just waiting for some others to. Let's accept here.
Yeah.
Hi, Patricia.
Hi, Dee. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I am just waiting. Oh, Nathaniel's here. Hi, Nathaniel. All right. How are you, Patricia?
Good. How's your day going so far, Nate?
Good. Good. I just had work, class, and this. And after I have another class, and then that will be my day.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you have a busy day.
Yeah, a little bit, but it's all right. It is all right. All right. I am just waiting for some people. Okay. Okay. I'm just going to give it a few here.
So right now we have just Dr. Nathaniel and somebody joined us.
Yes. Hello, Jackie, I believe. Yes. Yes. I'll start it in like, I don't know, 2 minutes or so.
And then Nate, is this able to be saved so that
Yeah.
people could then hear it later as well? Okay.
Mm-hmm. We save it and put it on our highlights on the Instagram.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, we'll be able to be saved. Okay. Alrighty. Um. Okay. My cat is like right behind me. when I first was starting, he was like in my camera view, and I was gonna be like, that is not my guest speaker. That is just an audience member.
How's the weather where you're at today?
Today it was very foggy. This morning it was oddly foggy, but it's warmer today because I'm pretty sure it's gonna rain at some point this week, so it's kind of humid.
Okay.
But it's pretty good for the most part. Not cold or anything, so that's nice.
Oh, good. Yeah, we actually had a little bit of fog this morning too, and just cooler, which is nice. It's not super hot today.
Okay. Hi, Valerie. All right. I think I'll go ahead and start, and people will trickle in. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this Wednesday afternoon. I hope your week has been off to a pretty good start, especially if you have midterms. I hope those are going well. Today, if you can tell by the title, we are talking about a topic that's very relevant to today's world with what's going on. And it's minority stress and mental trauma. And I have Patricia here. She works for the Counseling Center. I'm very excited to be doing this with you, Patricia, because I'm sure, like many others, and to yourself, that this hits very close to home. And it's something that should be talked about more and being a comfortable conversation. So if you want to go ahead, Patricia, and introduce yourself and talk about what you do at the Counseling Center, please do.
Yes, thank you, Nay, so much for collaborating with me on this topic. My name is Patricia Becerra. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I work at the University Counseling Center as the crisis care manager and clinical care manager. So what I do when I'm on campus, I would see students that are in crisis, help provide more intensive services to help them stabilize, and then transition them to working with one of our clinicians or someone in the community. And I also create our directory of providers by screening potential providers that our students can meet with, and kind of screening them as a way of seeing if they would be a good fit for our students as well. So I'm excited to be here and talk about this topic. So thank you so much to the peer educators for identifying this as a topic of relevance, and looking forward to our time together.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Patricia, for that. Before we get started on jumping into our 3 parts questions, just some housekeeping things. Of course, we're continuing on with our Cougars Care Workshop series. This upcoming Friday at 1 is going to be our 3rd one, which is going to be coping with sadness and depression. Of course, as all the others, you can receive SONA credits, and upon completing 4 of the 6 workshops, you'll get a certificate of completion as a nice incentive. If that is something you're interested in signing up on, you can check out our LinkedIn tree in the bio, and it will be right there for you to sign up. So to give an agenda of what we're going to be talking about today, of course, we're going to be talking about minority stress and what it is, what that looks like in the real world setting. What should you do if you're experiencing this kind of stress, resources for you that are on campus, and what allies can do. So to start off, why is this topic important? Why is minority stress real, important, and valid? Patricia, do you want to give background as to like what minority stress is and other things?
Yeah. Minority stress, refers to the additional stress that members of a marginalized group will experience because of prejudice and discrimination. And what distinguishes minority stress from other types of stress is that it's unique, right, to that specific target group, and that it's chronic and it's socially based. So in the sense that it's socially based, is that it's often perpetuated by institutional racism, also from social processes and structures beyond the individual events or conditions. So there's also this kind of sense of helplessness, I think, that comes with it, because there might not be something in the moment that we can do to change it, but yet we're, as an ethnic minority, we're impacted by it. And this also can be generational. So where we grew up in a home, whether our parents are immigrants or just people of color, we've kind of grown up with a cultural expectation, for instance, like you just need to work twice as hard, you need to be strong, saying that you're struggling with emotions could be weak. So there's almost a sense of pressure that as a minority, you have to work twice as hard as someone who's white just to get through society. So again, that's like an extra level of stress that you take on, and it's unrealistic to be able to live up to those expectations. And I think why it's valid now is because issues of racial injustice are being broadcasted, on the news, on social media, and these are topics of discussion. And I think what's hard is, as an ethnic minority, you can identify with these images that we see on social media, whether it's a family member that we could see being pulled over for no reason. And then there's a sense of fear that, will this happen to me? If I'm, a Black student on campus, am I going to be stopped, by APU police and be considered, someone that's violent just because of the color of my skin? So I think there's both this sense of increased presence of us noticing these events, and also a personalization that, as we see what happened to Breonna Taylor, thinking like, could that happen to me? Can someone just kind of come into where I'm living and harm me or be a victim of violence because of it? So I think both the issues of racial injustice are being shown more. Discussions are happening. So these, again, may be things that were triggered because then we're hearing other people's perspective. And if they're not a person of color, their feedback on what's happening can be hurtful and can come off as, even being another form of racism that we're now having to either explain or discuss more. So there's even this almost the sense of you could even kind of suffer from like this advocacy burnout if you're continuously in these dialogues feeling like you have to defend what it means, what the Black Lives Matter movement means, why it's important. So I think both of those reasons, the impact of it being on media and then the relevancy of how you can identify is really affecting both students, faculty, staff of color during this time.
Yes. Yeah, it's a lot with under such a 2 words. There's so much. Another big thing is microaggressions. Some people don't know like what they are because somebody will say something they think it's innocent, but to somebody it can really affect them. What would you say if you had to define our microaggressions, and how do you explain it to somebody who might not know? And have you ever seen anything with your clients in any setting about this issue?
Yeah, great questions. I think microaggressions is something, again, that we're learning more about, that they're defined as verbal, behavioral, and environmental indignities that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial slights and insults to the target person or group. I think what makes them really impactful when you are a victim of a microaggression is that they're indirect. So often the person that is stating the microaggression may not be aware of it. They're unconscious of their bias or their racism. And then it may not be visibly life-threatening in nature, but what makes them dangerous is that you think about it over time. So I think about like, even as, so I identify as Latina, but I can go somewhere and I'm light-skinned. Someone might say like, where are you from? And even that in a sense of like, do I have to always explain what my identity is? And you say, where are you from? Do you want me to tell you that I'm from La Mirada? What do you want me to say? So there's almost this sense of having to continuously explain who you are because you're not of the dominant culture. So that in of itself can be a microaggression. I think another example that I've heard some of my clients talk about is just being singled out in class as being the only student of color, and then being expected to be the speaker for that whole race. So like, oh, you're a Latina. What do you think it's been like, with the new changes in immigration policy? How do you think that's affecting, Latino families that are living in this area? So there's almost this burden that's put on us that we have to not only be the one that speaks out in class, but that somehow we have to represent our whole cultural group, which is a microaggression because my family specifically is from Colombia. So the impact of our immigration is different from, say, families that come from Mexico, where they're being targeted right now.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with another student recently that even shared just that professors continuously mispronounce her name, and they don't even bother to ask, how do I pronounce it? How can I say your name correctly? So again, that sense of this isn't important, I don't see you. And I think a big one that comes out is, I think, in our intersectionality as Christians, is there's this sense of, oh, but I don't see color. I love everybody. And so being colorblind is a microaggression because then again, people are associating that because we are all Christian, we've all had the same experience of life, and we haven't.
Right.
So, I think it's important to recognize that every race has had their own historical experience in the United States of racism as an ethnic minority, and we can't just be blind to it, right? We have to pay attention to it. Yeah, I think I answered some of your questions, May, in that. Was there anything you wanted me to follow up on?
Yeah, I think another big one, especially when it relates to names that I've seen even from high school, is the question of, oh, do you have an American name for international students? Like, that's a huge, like, at first I was so like I didn't know about microaggressions at the time until I came to college. But thinking about that now, like that's a huge like, wow. Why would you know, singling out and not even um, trying to learn how to say somebody's name and just saying, oh, what's your American name so it conveniences you is like a huge like
Yeah.
it's very
Yeah, like this is their identity, right? Like you
yeah,
have to acculturate yourself to be accepted. Like you can't
yeah,
remain who you are. Yeah,
hmm,
no, that's a good point.
yeah, that
Yeah.
is
And
huge.
then I think, yeah, and I think to help personalize it, Nay, are you open to kind of sharing what your experience has been like as a student of color and how you kind of are reacting to what's happening in our environment, with issues of racial injustice and, being a college student at this time?
So I am biracial. My father's side of the family is black and my mom is white. So I see both worlds. And it's very interesting, and growing up I didn't understand until probably entering high school. But when I look at, you know, how everything has been this past summer, I've realized just how important privilege is. And of course, I'm white passing. People physically looking at me would never know that I am mixed, that I'm both black and white, because I have fair skin. But if they saw me with my dad's side of the family, they would understand that. And I think this past summer, it of course, like many others, seeing what happened to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, it made me think of that could have been my brother and sister that
Mm-hmm.
had that happen, because they have a darker complexion than I do, so they have completely different experiences than I had in life, just because of our physical appearance. Um, and it's nice to see that, you know, it's finally being brought to the attention. But I've also seen how I've kind of learned who my true friends are, kind of, because I see some people are wanting to step up and step out of their comfort zone and learn, which is great. And then I've seen others who feel because they're not experiencing the same uh, you know, injustice, that they can't speak on it. But that's the huge thing about privilege, is that you should um, take advantage of it. And like for me, I was always educated from a young age that if your brother and sister is in trouble, like you need to do something. Like that's what my mom always taught me. um Thankfully, me and my siblings were never in a situation where any of us were unsafe and I had to do so. I'm thankful for that. But of course, I'm educated in that and others might not be. So I feel like this past summer, it's been hard to see so many innocent people of color just being killed over, um, like George Floyd, over a counterfeit bill, and Beyonce was literally sleeping in her home. And it's like, you, their experiences are so different from mine. And it's heartbreaking because that's something my brother and sister can experience. So I feel like I was doing a lot of educating friends and family from my mom's side this past summer, um, because I feel like they didn't understand just how prevalent this was until that time. So it's been a lot, but it's been an educating and eye-opening time. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you make a good point that I think you're doing an amazing job that you're using your experience to create moments of engagement with others of the dominant culture to increase their education. And I feel like that's definitely something we can all grow in, especially, being a part of APU. It's a predominantly white institution. And so there should be more allies speaking up for our students of color. And so maybe they have this sense of not knowing how to.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely we're going to kind of talk about some points of how to be a good ally. I just wanted to highlight one of the biblical verses that we talked about in regards to that. And that's Luke 4:18, that the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim and release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free. And so I feel like there's even this call for us as Christians to be an advocate, to create social change. And so I think having more dialogues such as this, having our campus be more aware of what microaggressions are, so that we can begin to shift and create safe spaces on campus for our students of color to feel like they can get support or get access to resources without feeling like they are going to be targeted, or again, be a victim of a microaggression. Yeah, so I didn't know if you also wanted to share the quote in regards to allyship, and then we can talk about that, Nate.
Oh yeah. I know for those who most probably experience this kind of stress, you of course must feel like not sure where to go for help. Of course, a shameless plug about counseling center, and we do offer, the big thing is that a lot of students aren't aware of is that the counseling is free. So please do take advantage of that. If you feel like, even if it's one session and you just feel like you really need to talk to somebody, there's amazing counseling centers, amazing counselors at the counseling center that are glad to help. We also have workshops. And more on a student fun thing, there's so many organizations on campus that have amazing environments for conversations like these. To name a few, there's MRSO, which I'm a part of, multi-racial student organization, BSA, LASA. There's so many different ones that give a safe space for students who identify under those backgrounds to have these conversations and feel like they belong somewhere on campus. And you always should feel belong, but of course in a time like this it must be hard. So please do step out of your comfort zone a little bit and check those clubs out, because they are there for you as a resource for you to feel like having a home on campus and to have a safe space. So that,
Yeah.
I wanted to add in.
Oh, and I apologize that I jumped to part 3 before our part 2. So yes, I can talk about ways to cope. If you are experiencing microaggression, one of the methods to combat it is to, call it out. I know it can feel fearful in the moment to say something, but often when we are a victim of a microaggression, we can ask the speaker, what did you mean by that? So going back to my example, if somebody said, oh, where are you from? I could clarify, like, oh, do you mean that you want to know where I am demographically, or you're wanting to know about my ethnic identity, and tell me why you're wanting to know that? And so again, it may be risky to kind of put it back on the speaker. And if those moments go unquestioned, then the speaker may not know that they are committing a microaggression.
Right.
So I think being able to recognize in the moment is using discernment. How important is the person you're speaking with important enough for you to be able to educate them that that statement you made, I experienced it as such, it was hurtful or discriminatory, and then being able to educate, whether it's your friend or family member, why that's a microaggression. I know that this is hard, being a victim of a microaggression, but you have to choose whether you're going to confront it, is being prepared to disarm the person who committed it. Because often if we do put it back on the person, they may become defensive, and then it may lead to like a more triggering conversation. So being able to say, like, this conversation may be hard to have, but I want you to know that when you said this is how I felt. So it does have to kind of put that ownership on the victim of the microaggression to try to disarm the person who made the statement, just to try to hopefully have a conversation that doesn't lead to further hurt. And then obviously you always have the choice to decide, am I going to say something about this, or is this something that I maybe need to process with others, peers from my ethnic group, or be able to process more, with someone else on campus that I trust before going back to that person. Because sometimes this can happen in the workplace, it can happen in the classroom. So you do want to be able to plan out what you want to say before you say something. So again, it doesn't become something more difficult and affecting you in the moment. So those are just ways to respond to microaggressions. Ways to cope, and overall with minority stress is to make sure you have your support system. So student ethnic orgs on campus, it's great to be a part of them as a way of being able to have an affinity group. And so research shows that the more you connect with your group of affinity, the more success you can have in college because you can create the sense of belonging by being around other people that both look like you, have the same cultural practices, or have the same family backgrounds. Can be a safe space. And also being able to recognize that sometimes you just need to have self-care. So I know during the summer when I met with some students of color, they were going to protest. They were educating their friends and family about why the Black Lives Matter movement was important. But they were becoming exhausted. And so even working with them, and it's okay to take a break. It's okay to turn off social media and be off of it for a couple of days. And also not to feel like you have to be the only advocate, right? So sometimes you can say, you know what, this is a great resource. Check out this book. I know a lot of people this summer were reading like How to Be an Anti-Racist. Because it shouldn't be up to the BIPOC student, Black, Indigenous, or other people of color responsibility, to educate everyone. There'd be no way that we could do it. So I think recognizing when you can have those conversations, and then recognizing when you need to maybe guide, your friends that are white to other resources to help educate them. And then self-care can look different for everybody. But being able to establish a routine, whether it's engaging in meditation, there's some really great apps that help with that, exercising, listening to uplifting BIPOC stories. I think with everything happening in the media, we're hearing about all these tragedies, and that could be really traumatic, hearing it over and over again. So sometimes we need to intentionally listen to, uplifting stories, and being able to also shift our own narrative of what do we want to take away from this experience so that we don't burn out. How can we still listen to other people of color that are experiencing success or experiencing positive moments in their life? And so I think what goes back to like social media, like being able to recognize who do you want to follow, who do you need to unfollow during this time, not feeling the need to respond to every comment, but deciding which ones are important for you to respond to. Practicing awareness, just kind of being able to be self-reflective of where you're at, recognizing what you need, definitely having self-compassion, honoring your feelings because they're real and valid, setting boundaries. So it's okay to say no. You can't attend an event, or you don't want to connect with a certain friend during this time. And so it goes back to, picking your battles of which ones are meaningful for you to engage in, and which ones are the ones that you're like, I just can't do this right now. And again, to promote engagement, I think having spaces of support. So not that experiencing minority stress means you have PTSD, but if you're feeling like the stress is getting in the way of you experiencing joy in your life, or feeling like you can focus in class, definitely reach out to our counseling center. You can complete forms online, and then still have to follow up with a phone call to our office. And we do have our administrative assistant, Kim, who will answer, and will get you scheduled with an appointment. And you can definitely process and kind of dig deeper into strategies to help cope, ways to recognize how this is affecting you, and just making sure that you're creating that time to reach out for help when you need it.
Mm-hmm. As Maddie said. Yes. Thank you so much for that, Patricia.
Oh, you're welcome.
The last thing we have is what allies can do. There's so many things allies can do that I don't think we could fit into a few minutes, but to highlight one of the big ones that stand out to me is understanding your privilege, taking on the struggle as your own. I feel I've witnessed this summer, a lot of people tend to not, generally speaking, a lot of people tend to not want to dive into something if it's not affecting them, but
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the problem, because people who don't have the power to bring it up, they, as Patricia was saying earlier, that a whole minority group can't advocate for themselves. It just can't happen. It needs everybody involved. So understanding this struggle and taking it on as your own is a huge step. Putting
Mm-hmm.
yourself in their shoes and how would you feel if this was happening to you or a family member, is a huge thing. And transferring the benefits of your privilege to those who lack it. Nathaniel made some great notes for us, talking about, I think, from a source that I'll I'll put in after this live. It's from guide to allyship.com. It has a whole article about all of this. But the author was saying he has a responsibility to use his privilege to fix historical oppression, because I can. And then a really nice quote that he put in from Tom Wise is, guilt is something you feel for what you've done. Responsibility is something you take because of the kind of person you are. We have to take responsibility for things as we find them, not because we've created them, but because we are the only ones left to do it. So I feel like that is a very powerful quote,
Mm-hmm.
um, because it perfectly sums up on why being an advocate is needed,
Yeah.
especially, like, as a new generation, we have to make a change for not only ourselves but for our future. So it's very prevalent. Um, Another thing that Nathaniel put in somewhere was going to um, going to ethnic orgs.
Yeah.
I've been to, of course, at Mercer, I've seen people who they didn't identify with any, they weren't biracial or anything, but they wanted to be there just to learn about people's experiences so they could walk away with understanding even a little bit of what it's like to, what kind of struggles this group has to experience and how they can better, um, kind of educate others. I feel like it's a huge thing when um, somebody walks into a room and they're like, identify
Mm-hmm.
um, as I don't identify as Black or Latina, but I'm here to just learn, and I want to hear you out so I can better understand and to educate others. I think that's a really powerful thing, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people should try it. I have myself. Um, it's really eye-opening, and you can learn so much online, but being there physically in person with the people that actually experience is another.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that you're suggesting that, May, and also to encourage people to look at our SCRD page on the APU website. There's a listing of all the different ethnic orgs, and I think you can reach out to the presidents to see when their meetings are. And what's nice about being everything virtual, you can fit that into your schedule. You can jump into one of their Zoom meetings and
yeah.
learn about that ethnic org, practices, ways in which you as anyone of the dominant culture can support them, and be able to recognize what is something within your control, what you can do to decrease racism, to decrease the ongoing effect of microaggressions. So I love that you are spotlighting them, and definitely encourage others to look at the SCRD page to check it out as well.
Yes, I was just about to bring up SCRD. All they had a whole meeting just about having these uncomfortable conversations, and they're having one later today at 4 o'clock about voting, which is another very important thing, that is being highly promoted.
Mhm.
So definitely, if you have time, you should definitely check it out. SCRD is an amazing resource for students, especially during this time. Um, another another thing to kind of highlight for allies is standing up even when you feel scared, because I think that's a huge thing, and it can be intimidating to stand up when you are scared. But if we're going back to privilege, we have to understand that the minorities can't do the same thing that those of the dominant group can. And if you're seeing an injustice, or if you're seeing somebody making racial remarks or microaggressions, there's absolutely nothing wrong with confronting the person and asking, what did you mean by that? Or just kind of educating them, because like we were saying from the beginning, some people come from very different backgrounds, and something that may have been okay in their household is definitely not okay in society today, or that's just how they grew up and they never knew that was a microaggression or something of racism. So I feel like standing up for those of the minority groups and just confronting somebody, just asking them what did they mean by that, is a really huge step, because there's so much we could post about social media all day about all this injustice, but to actually go into the world and use that and advocate and stand up is something else. That's a huge accomplishment, and that's basically what needs to happen. So
I wanted to give an example, Nay, of what someone from the dominant culture can do. I think even in classes, as things are online, is allowing for the students of color to feel safe to share, right, in those breakout rooms. So using your privilege to say, like, hey, Nay, I would really love to hear your thoughts on this. You know, what are you thinking? So again, allowing that student of color who may not feel confident to share to feel like their voice matters, and we want to hear what they have to say. Again, getting to know somebody. So kind of looking at your own circle of friends and noticing, like, do you have students of color that are in your circle of friendship? And if not, you know, are there ways that you can begin friendships with students that are from different backgrounds, you know, as a way of understanding what is their experience, what is their lived experience, and being able to, you know, also, I think, be aware of what our own unconscious bias may be. Again, if we don't have friends of color, we're not really aware of what, you know, is going on from their perspective. So engaging in true friendships with other students can be a great way to come alongside them during this journey.
Yeah, very true, and very relevant. I feel like that's everything that we had to go over today. Thank you so much to those that answered asked some questions from a few days ago. That helped a lot, and I hope we addressed it all. I'm pretty sure from the list that I received, we pretty much answered everything within our presentation. Was there anything you wanted to add, Patricia, before we head out?
Just to thank you, Nate, if you're able to put together some of the resources. I think you're going to be later sharing them on the story. I think you did a great job of listing resources to unpack racial trauma and begin to understand what allies can do in regards to advocacy. So hopefully we'll be sharing some of that on the story today for students to look at in regards to books to read or YouTubes to watch. But again, I think it starts with educating yourself first, not putting that expectation on the BIPOC student to answer all questions about their race, but being able to be informed and show that you're wanting to learn on your own, you know, before you go into those conversations with students of color. So thank you so much, Nate, for having me on, and I love, having this time with you, and thank you all for coming on to the live. I love what the peer educators are doing, so excited to see what you all continue to work on this year.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I hope to see all of you this Friday afternoon, and if not, then next week for our Wellness Wednesday. All right, have a good one, Patricia.
Bye, Nick. Take care.
Bye, take care.